Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex, and I am here in a wonderful interview with Vicki Delany. So Vicki is one of Canada's most prolific and varied crime writers and a national bestseller in the US. She has written more than 40 books, clever cozies to gothic thrillers to gritty police procedurals to historical fiction and novellas in adult literacy. She is currently writing 4 cozy mystery series, the Tea by the Sea Mysteries for Kensington, the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop series for Crooked Lane Books, the Catskills Resort Mysteries for Penguin Random House, and the Lighthouse Library series as Eva Gates for Crooked Lane. Vicki is a past president of the Crime Writers of Canada and the co-founder and organizer of the Women Killing It Crime Writing Festival. Her work has been nominated for the Derringer, the Boney Blythe, the Ontario Library Association Golden Oak, and the Arthur Ellis Award. Vicki is the recipient of the 2019 Derek Murdoch Award for contributions to Canadian crime writing. She lives in Prince Edward County, Ontario, and she is here with us today at Maple Leaf Mysteries. Welcome, Vicki. Oh, we seem to be having that muting problem, Vicki. Sorry.
Unmute. Is that better?
There we go. There we go.
So all I was saying was thanks so much. I'm really, really happy to be back. And thanks to Mike for setting up another lovely conference. And thanks to Alex for talking to me.
Oh, this is going to be a great afternoon here.
Let's go.
So let's dive right into questions. So tell us about your series and your latest book.
Okay. Well, my latest book is actually my most forthcoming one. Kind of funny way of saying it. The next Sherlock Holmes Bookshop mystery will come out on the 10th of January, so it's now available for pre-order, and it is called The Game is a Footnote. So actually this week coming up, the previous Sherlock Holmes Bookshop book, a 3-book problem, will be released in paperback on December the 6th, I think is the date. So that's just next week. For those that prefer to read their mysteries in paperback, it's going to be out in paperback.
Perfect. Perfect. So for those who read cozy or those who don't, what to you makes a cozy?
Okay. Yeah, cozy mystery is, as you know, I mean, obviously this is, this whole conference has been talking about the whole range of mystery novels. Mystery novels vary enormously, right? Or crime novels, from, the lightest of the light to sort of the darkest noir thrillers. So cozy is very, very much at the light end, almost as light as you can go. A cozy is sometimes defined as a mystery novel in which there is no graphic sex or violence. And I don't think that's actually a very good definition, because you can have a really, really dark, disturbing psychological thriller that has no overt sex and violence. So cozy takes it a lot further. I think to me, the essence of a cozy is that it's about nice people living in a nice world. And something has happened that has upset the peace and harmony of their community. And it's up to our protagonist, with or without a few friends, to set the world back to rights. So the heart of a cozy to me is that nice community. And it's also that it's an optimistic feel to a book, because the crime is resolved. The crime doesn't have long-lasting implications. Well, it does for the family and certainly for the dead person. But, it doesn't have, for the world in general, it doesn't have long-lasting implications. And I sometimes think also that a cozy, to me, has no sense of tragedy. If I can give you just a little quote. I used to write a police detective series set in British Columbia, a Constable Molly Smith series. And in one of those books, she says to a superior officer, she says something along the lines of, when I decided I wanted to become a police officer, I knew I'd have to deal with abused children and raped women, accident victims, and all of that. She said, but that's not the worst of it, is it? The worst of it is the sheer tragedy of some people's lives. So in a cozy mystery, there's no real tragedy. I mean, death happens, yes, and death is never fun, it's never amusing, but it doesn't always have to be, and it often isn't a genuine tragedy in the way that it is in a darker sort of a thing. So in a cozy mystery, usually, not always, usually the dead person or the murdered person is somebody nobody liked very much, or it's a stranger to town. So you don't have a whole lot of emotional involvement. Also cozy, if I can continue, because there's lots of aspects to it. Cozy is very much a puzzle mystery. A puzzle mystery is sort of like the traditional mystery. Think Agatha Christie, or it's something on TV like Death in Paradise. It's almost, I see almost as a game of wits between the writer and the reader. The writer must lay down the clues in such a way that the astute reader has a very good chance of solving the mystery at or slightly before the detective does. But the clues must be laid down in such a way that it's not obvious. So that you've got red herrings and false trails and dead ends and all that. So it's very much a puzzle mystery because, as I said, you should be able to solve it. And on second reading, the clues should leap out at you. Something that was sort of slipped in. Oh, I didn't notice that John had red shoes on. But the second reading, oh, look, John has red shoes. That's how we know that he's the killer. So it is very much a puzzle mystery. And one last aspect, what distinguishes a cozy mystery from a traditional mystery, because everything I've described right now, you could think of as a traditional sort of a mystery with an amateur sleuth or something like that. Cozy mystery usually has a hook. The hook is something like it's usually the place where the protagonist works, or it's their hobby. In my case, like this Sherlock Holmes bookstore, there's a library, there's a tea room. The year-round Christmas series is all about a town that celebrates Christmas year-round. And by the hook, I mean, that's not an incidental thing to the book. In any book involving an amateur sleuth, the sleuth presumably has a job and lives in a town and that kind of stuff. But that's not important. Whereas in a cozy mystery, a lot of readers come to the mysteries initially because they're interested in that hobby, or they're interested, in finding out what a Sherlock Holmes bookshop would be like, or they're really big fans of Christmas stories, so they read the Christmas mysteries. So there's a fair amount of detail in the books that are related to the hooks without overwhelming the book in minutiae. So that kind of is a long-winded definition, but that's how I see a cozy.
That's really interesting. I'm going to have to go back to all the cozies I've read and find the hooks for all of them.
It's usually right there. It's usually right there on the cover.
Yeah.
Another thing about cozies is you can usually tell them, you should be able to tell them, in fact, by the title and by the cover. The title's kind of whimsical. Sometimes it's punny. The cover is, I don't have any of my books with me. I was explaining to people before that I'm actually visiting my daughter in Ottawa right now, which is why I just kind of have a plain background. So I didn't bring any books, but I usually like to hold them up and you can see right away by the colors of those books, the cover rather, that they're going to be quite light. There's almost always a cat or a dog or another animal on it. The Christmas series in particular is overwhelmed sort of with Christmas whimsy and that. So, yeah.
Yes. Well, you kind of tapped into a question I was going to ask later. So I want to find that one here. Where'd it go? It was all about how you come up with the titles for your books.
And the short answer is that I don't, because there's actually, as they say, two types of people in the world: those that like puns and those that don't. And I'm one of the don'ts. I can't come up with a cozy title to save my life. I mean, I really can't. When I wrote the Molly Smith series that I wrote, and I wrote a couple of standalone psychological suspense, I had no trouble coming up with titles. I quite liked some of the titles that I came up with. Those Valley of the Lost, I think that's a great title. Winter of Secrets. For the cozies, I kind of don't. I might have some kind of an idea. The year-round Christmas series, that's not difficult. I sort of take it. Those ones, I shouldn't say never, because those ones I do take a Christmas carol, a Christmas saying, a Christmas rhyme, and just twist it a little bit. So you have titles like Rest Ye Murdered Gentlemen, Hark the Herald Angels Slay. So those ones aren't that difficult. The Sherlock Holmes bookshop titles are getting harder and harder all the time, because I want a title that reflects the fact that it's set in a bookshop, the fact that it's a cozy, and that it's got something to do with Sherlock Holmes. Elementary, the first one was Elementary, she read. I thought that was really great. That was my idea. And we've had some great titles, but now I'm kind of getting a little desperate. If anybody has any suggestions, send them to me.
Put them in the Q&A section of our chat today.
I've actually had help from the Sherlock Holmes Society in Toronto, the bootmakers in Toronto, suggested a couple names. The next year's book is The Game is a Footnote, and that was suggested by one of them. I think that's really cute.
It's very clever. Really like that. All right, since you haven't always written cozies, was it hard to switch to that subgenre of sort of mystery, and what draws you to writing cozies?
It wasn't hard at all. In fact, I kind of think it came up at exactly the right time for me. I had written 3 standalone psychological suspense. I'd written the 8-part Constable Molly Smith series. I wrote the 4-part Klondike Gold Rush series and several novellas for adult literacy. And maybe I was getting, I don't know, is burned out the right word? I sometimes look back on it and think I was, let's say I'm sort of losing interest. Maybe I was kind of feeling I'd done what I wanted to do. And, I sort of had nothing more to say. And I got the opportunity to write the first Lighthouse Library series for Penguin Random House in the US. And I fell into that really, really easily. I found it really fun to do. One of the things when I talk about cozies, I use the word fun a lot. So cozy to me should be fun for the reader and should be fun for the author as well. So switching to the writing the cozies really did give me a whole new sort of lease on my writing life. I found a whole lot of more enthusiasm. So I think getting the opportunity actually hit me really at a good time. I had a half-hearted idea for a new book set in Prince Edward County where I live, sort of around a ghost living in a winery. It was very half-hearted. And I think that, it wasn't working. And I think that part of that was because I wasn't mentally sure that I wanted to continue doing that sort of book. So so the switch came really easily, and I switched totally. I completely stopped writing the other kind of stuff, and now I only write the cozies, and I'm very happy doing that.
That's great. Is there a formula for writing cozies, and what are you not allowed to do? Cozies.
That's a good question.
On it a little bit.
And people often do look down on cozies, and they're considered to be formulaic, and there's actually nothing wrong with a formula. Think, for example, about a haiku is or a sonnet, right? Those have very, very carefully defined formulas, so to speak, because that's the art form that they are. So the formula, I would say formula might be a little. You need to have an interesting protagonist who needs to live. That's one of the things also, that they must live in an interesting place, usually a small town. It can be a community within a small town, but it's not a big city police department, for example, or something like that, because there's a lot of interpersonal relationships. Mm-hmm. And interpersonal relationships all have to do with not only building characters, but with the solving of the mystery. A little bit off track, and I'll go back to your question in a minute, because one of the other things about cozy that I like is that the protagonist is an amateur sleuth. She has no access to any kind of police records, certainly no forensic evidence, DNA testing, anything like that. So I can forget about all that kind of stuff. So cozy, like an amateur sleuth, is very much about observing people. The sleuth observes people. She solves the mystery by observing what somebody said and seeing discrepancies, or remembering some minor detail that doesn't fit into something that's happened later. And I think, to me, that's one of the interesting things about writing the cozies, that I can concentrate on that observation of people as opposed to the DNA evidence and the fingerprints and all that sort of stuff. And I've now lost my train of thought. What was the original question?
What are you not allowed to do?
What are you not allowed to do? There are things that you're not allowed to do. In no mystery, except something really, really dark, are you allowed to harm a dog or a cat. I mean, that's kind of a general rule. So in cozies, because it's the nature of a cozy, again, there's no real tragedy, as I say, in the light around the murder. There's no lasting repercussions. So it's not a serial killer. It's never a serial killer. It's never a mob hit or international terrorist. It can look like it. In a couple of my books, I've had, them investigating whether the mob was sent to rub this guy out, kind of thing. But it always turns out that's not the case. So the murder is personal, not necessarily between the protagonist and the dead person, but the reason for it is personal. So certainly no children endangerment at all. Like, I wouldn't even have, in one of the Constable Molly Smith's books, a child goes missing and she is found safe and unharmed. I wouldn't even do that in the cozy, having a child go missing, no suggestion of endangerment. So that's really about all. It's all about keeping the things on the light side, I think, even though you're dealing with murder. I personally love cozies. That's sort of my go-to before bed. I recently switched to some thrillers, and it's a different feeling when you're going to sleep at night. So kind of on that note, what makes cozies so popular then? Well, I think it's exactly what you hit on it. Actually, you said exactly it. Particularly, I noticed I got a lot of emails, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, from people that wrote to me and said how they enjoyed reading my books or books like mine, because they would watch TV and the news would be dreadful and they were locked down and missing seeing their family and everything just sort of seemed, everything in the real world seemed hard. So they enjoyed reading about a place where things are fairly pleasant. And although unpleasant things happen, lives are lost and people are threatened, it's going to be resolved successfully at the end. And I think there's a time and a place for that a lot of people, were looking for that sort of thing during the pandemic. And then those readers stayed with cozies after, which is a good thing.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about locations. So especially in your novels, there's some beautiful, small, picturesque locations. I know I started with the Lighthouse mystery series, and love hearing about the water and the little shops and everything like that. So can you tell us how you came up with some of these great hometowns for your protagonists?
Okay. The Lighthouse Library series, which incidentally I write under the pen name of Eva Gates. And that was my first cozy mystery. And that was actually, the reason I got that was a work for hire. What a work for hire is not as uncommon as some people might think. The work for hire means, I'll explain briefly, that the publisher decides on the sort of what kind of a book they want, say the format, and then they go out looking for an author to write it, as opposed to the usual way of it, which is an author writes a proposal, writes a book and sends it in and asks if a publisher wants it. So work for hire is the best known examples of work for hire. Carolyn Keene, who writes obviously Nancy Drew and Franklin W. Dixon, I think, with the Hardy Boys. There are umpteen people named Carolyn Keene who, the author keeps changing, but they keep the same name. So the Lighthouse Library series was a work for hire, meaning that they gave me the premise. So they gave me the location in the lighthouse, where the lighthouse is, and a very, very, very brief bio of the main character and a very, very brief idea for what they wanted to see in the first book. No more than a page or two. So then I took that and ran with it. And now it's all my own, meaning that, I came up with all the additional characters and all the plots in the later books and all that sort of stuff. So that book was specifically set at a very specific place, which is the real life Body Island Lighthouse, located just outside Nags Head, North Carolina, which is, by the way, a real working lighthouse today. You can go there. And that itself was a interesting challenge. It's the only book I've set in a real place that really exists. Not only the lighthouse itself, but because it's all set in a real town, I kept the real town. So the streets that they drive down the Croatan Highway going or something, or they turn left at this intersection, that all exists. If they might, for example, go to, call on a suspect on Lakeshore Drive. There will be a Lakeshore Drive, but I would never say 123 Lakeshore Drive, somebody's house. But it means, and I try and describe the houses and the scenery and the geography and all that as best I can. So the answer to your question is I didn't settle on that. I was given that. I'd never even been to the Outer Banks until I started writing that book. So I did go down and have a look, and I went to the lighthouse and saw the lighthouse. So with the other books, a couple of things sort of in mind. A lot of people, and definitely including me, when they go on vacation, they like to read a book or books that is set in the place. I'm just back from Italy. So the first thing I did, or the thing I did just before I went to Italy, was I read a whole kind of, getting my words mixed. I read a whole bunch of books set in Italy because I like to do that. And I find that readers really like that as well. So if I set my stuff in tourist destinations, I have a good chance of getting into the bookstores in those things. I know that my books are held in the independent bookstores in the Outer Banks. And the gift shop of the Body Island Lighthouse actually has copies of my books. So you can go there and buy them.
Fabulous.
So that's a good idea. Plus, it's also, I sort of set, the Sherlock Holmes bookshop series is set on Cape Cod. And that was because I wanted someplace that I could go in a day, like a drive there in a day and a few days looking around. For those books, again, I wanted a tourist setting. I also wanted something set on the ocean. I live in Ontario. We don't have a whole lot of ocean, but I find that adds a lot to the atmosphere. there's always, it's a bright sunny day and, sailboats are out or the storm clouds are moving in or something like that. So it really all helps. So, and because I had set the Sherlock Holmes bookshop series on Cape Cod, I decided to set the Tea by the Sea mysteries at a different part of Cape Cod, just for all those very same reasons. Yep.
Yes. So you would recommend to anybody creating a setting for their novel that they're familiar with the area, or if it is set in a particular area versus something that's made up, I guess.
Yeah, in fact, unless you're writing actually fantasy or science fiction, you really can't completely make something up. Yeah, you can do you can do an awful lot online now. You can go to Google Earth and look at the streets, and I do that now, because I've been there. So now if I'm looking for a particular description of a street, I'll look it up on Google Earth. But there is nothing like having been there. I'll give you an example if you like. When I was in the Outer Banks and I went to the lighthouse at night because I wanted to see how much illumination you got from the light at the top of the lighthouse. And on the way back, a deer ran across the road. And it really surprised me coming from Ontario, where I think deer as being, things that live in the woods. It's very sandy there. It's just a narrow little strip of land surrounded by water, not much vegetation, lots of sand. And a deer ran, and I thought, I was surprised actually that, I shouldn't have been, but there were deer there. So I used that in one of my books. She gets away from the guy who's driving down a dark road at night. The bad guy's chasing her, and this deer runs between the two cars. He doesn't hit it, but he swerves and he goes off the road into the sand. So that's just a little example about how saying something in real, even though you think you've researched it extensively, can always add a lot more. One thing I'll mention that I sort of talked about all the different books I write. One of the series I write is the Catskill Summer Resort Mysteries, and they're set in 1953. So I can't go to 1953. But I read an awful lot of books written by people who were there at that time. So that's how I handled that.
Yes, that's a great series. Actually, I've recently been reading that series as well. So many of our audience members will be familiar with her other works under the pseudonym Eva Gates. So what does writing under a pseudonym do for you and your audience and your market reach? Does it help?
No, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't actually advise anybody to do it. It makes things a little confusing. In this case, because the Lighthouse Library series was a work for hire, I had to use a pseudonym because the publisher owns the copyright for the work for hire books. They also own the copyright of the author's name. So that if sample in the Nancy Drew thing, they can hire another author to write under the name of Carolyn Keene. So I had to write it for a pseudonym. And so actually that series was dropped by Penguin Random House, and was picked up by Crooked Lane. And I got the copyright. So I now own the copyright to that series. So I could, and we discussed whether I would start using the Vicki Delany name, and we thought that would just be too confusing. But generally, no, I wouldn't choose to use a pseudonym if I hadn't already done that. I think that particularly, you're trying to, as a writer, I think it's important that you build your brand, and that, certainly people come to you because they like you, your writing. So you want them to be able to find you. And that's writing within the same genre. Certainly, I know people that are writing completely different things. So I can understand maybe if I had a fantasy series as well, I might want a different name because I would want a sharp definition between the two types of books. I know someone who wrote a series of erotica under her real name. So when she got picked up with the Cozy series, she kind of had ginger. She had picked up and said, "Yeah, had to use a pseudonym." Real name. Yeah. So the answer to your question is, it's not. I don't think it's done me any good. Other people have other reasons for doing it, but that's what it was.
That's really interesting, because I wondered if those writing cozy, sometimes the authors' names are cutesy, sort of a cutesy name, and I wondered if they were.
Yeah, and one of the things, certainly, it's unfortunate in a way that people with really complicated last names, like Eastern European last name, 4 syllables and 2 vowels, it could be hard. When we were looking for the Eva Gates name, we wanted something easy to spell, easy to pronounce. So a lot of yeah, some cozy writers do try and get the kind of a pseudonym that would make it sound like they were a cozy writer. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
I do know there are not more than an insignificant amount of cozy series that are written by men that use a female pseudonym.
Yep. Sort of getting that audience that they want there
Yes,
to
yes.
relate to them. Yes.
Yeah.
So, as an author, what has been one of your proudest moments?
I think I was a real when Mike Martin phoned me to say that the Crime Writers of Canada wanted to award me with the Derek Murdoch Award for my contributions to Canadian crime writing. I think I was really, really touched. I was really, really touched. So I'd say unquestionably getting that reward was an extremely proud moment, because I believe in the Canadian mystery community. I really do. I think that yeah, and this lovely conference that Mike has put on this weekend as well. I think we need that. And I believe in the, as I said, I believe in the Canadian mystery community. It's always been hugely welcoming, and everybody's very close. And so what little I could do to promote it, I'm happy to have done that. So that was just great. I really like getting emails from readers. I get all kinds. I get some that say, I didn't like your book, and some say, I liked your book, but, and once in a while you'll get somebody who says, this book really helped me at a hard time. So that's always really rewarding too. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's great that that readers can reach out to the authors of the books that they love so much. It's just like a special thing you can do that you can't do with everybody out there. So that's wonderful.
I think that's, can I just say, I think that's one of the things that's missing, certainly since the demise of Bloody Words, and also with the pandemic coming on, is that opportunity in a lot of ways for writers to, to get together and meet in Canada in particular, meet their favorite Canadian writers. And because, this is lovely. I mean, it's lovely that you and I are able to chat, and there's a whole lot of people listening in, but it's still not the same, right? It's still not that closeness of being in person. So. But we're doing what we can.
Yes, we are. And again, we're happy to take that audience questions. I have a lot of questions myself, but we're happy to take your questions today. If you have any, please put them in the Q&A. So switching it up a bit, what was your favorite childhood book?
My favorite childhood book. I can't necessarily recall a favorite of mine, but a favorite that I enjoyed reading to my own children was Charlotte's Web. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, mm-hmm. Yeah, loved Charlotte's Web, loved reading it to my own children. I have grandchildren now, and, I bought them a copy. That's just, that's a beautiful story. Certainly, again, I loved reading the Dr. Seuss books to my kids. Most of them are pretty good.
So this may have a similar answer. I'm not sure. If there was a character out there that you could have written, maybe the story that goes along with it, do you have one in mind that you wish you had written, that you could have written?
So actually, you didn't, you sent me a list of questions that was not on it. So I'm going to switch your answer up a little bit. That I think it would have been incredibly exciting to have been Jane Austen, because Jane Austen didn't just write a book that is being talked about, these 2 decades later, but basically she almost started the concept of a book, a novel as we know it, from scratch. There were very few novels, meaning a tale told with characters and setting and things that happen, drama and a little bit of a, suspense. Are they going to get together and that sort of thing? People back then generally read, sermons were really popular. You'd read a book of sermons or something like that. So I think she pretty much almost invented literature as we know it. So I would, I would certainly like to be Jane Austen. So now, of course, I am thinking of, I would have loved to have written A Christmas Carol.
Oh.
All those wonderful characters, old Scrooge and all those people in and out of his lives, the Ghost of Christmas Present, Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, and all that. Yeah, I would have liked to have written A Christmas Carol.
This is a question now you're going to be thinking of in your sleep and popping up. Oh, there's my.
Yeah.
Too. So I'm switching a little bit here because we didn't talk too much about travel. I know you like to travel. You said you just came back from a trip. You have a travel bucket list?
Oh, I wouldn't say bucket list, but I have go places I want to go. I've just come back from Italy. I have already booked a trip to Costa Rica for 1 month in Costa Rica in February to March, middle February to the middle of March. So I've been lots of places. I'm lucky enough that I've been able to go to lots of places, and yeah, there's still places I'd like to go someday.
And when you're on vacation, are you on vacation, or is there no vacation from writing?
No, I am very much on vacation. I really can turn my mind off. I'm at my daughter's house this weekend helping her move. I won't even think about what I'm working on. So I really do separate my head into two components, with one little bit of an exception. And that's that I've just started the next Tea by the Sea mystery. And I have 50 something books, right? I'm starting to run out of ideas. So when I was in Italy, I did say to Barbara, because I traveled to Italy with Barbara Fradkin, who most of you know, really having some trouble coming up with a plot for the next Tea by the Sea mystery. And she said, I don't think I can help you much, because I write these gritty police procedurals and darker amateur sleuths. Oh, no, yeah, I know. And then she said, well, we were just in, all these great art galleries with all these pictures painted by women of John the Baptist having his head cut off. So maybe you could do something like that. And I said, decapitation is not usually a murder method in a cozy mystery. So she said, and she came up with the idea that I'm going to use is, I've already started to write it, is a wedding shower. The bride opens this anonymous gift and it's a headless doll. Someone has cut the head off her beloved childhood doll. So there you go. There's a rare example of me working on vacation, and it actually worked out quite well. So I got a good idea. So all I did there is that night I sent an email to myself on my phone with that idea, and then I never thought about it again until I got home, read the email, and started to work on it. So, yeah.
Wow, that's great. But we were talking before we came on live for everybody about the quantity of books that you write in a year. So why don't you let everybody know? So you're not writing on vacation, but you somehow managed to write this many books a year.
I write 4 books a year now. Yeah, I have 4 different series going at any one time, and I have 1 book. I'm contracted for 1 book from each series a year. I don't write when I'm away from home, but I do write when I'm at home. I do write every single day without fail. And people often ask about my writing routine. I consider myself a very undisciplined person. So because I'm very undisciplined, I have to be disciplined in order to sort of churn out the amount of books that I do. So I have a very set writing time, in the morning between X and usually X. In the morning, sort of 9 till maybe 1, 2, something like that. One of the things also that I have a dedicated laptop that's used only for writing books. I don't do anything else on it. I've never set up email, never set up Facebook. I don't do stuff like even write blog posts, prepare for interviews like this, nothing except write books. And the reason I do that is to get me away from the fingers wandering and suddenly you're in Facebook and suddenly you're down the rabbit hole. And that sort of, it's just too easy to get distracted. It's too easy to start doing something else. So that's why I find it works for me to have just a completely dedicated computer. And that's when I do my first draft. My second draft, so I will, for example, write, like I'm writing a Tea by the Sea mysteries. So I'll say something like, I made XX to serve at afternoon tea. Later on in my second draft, I'll decide what XX is. And I might want to look up a recipe, or, I might have a description of a place and I want to look up what the place looks like. And then, whoa, oh, sorry. Are you still there?
You're still there, yep.
Oh, okay, I'm back. No, my phone went off and that sort of interrupted my screen. So in the second draft, I will then take my iPad, the one I'm talking to right now, and have that beside me, beside my dedicated laptop, so I can look up that XX stuff and fill that kind of things in. But for the first draft, yeah, it's got to be just get it all down as fast as I can and then go back and do the research bits later.
Before we skip to audience questions, along the line of, it's very disciplined of you to have this separate laptop. Do you have any, this is sort of a fun question, do you have any like snack or drink that is specific to when you're writing? This is my popcorn that I eat when I'm writing my book.
And the answer is actually nothing. Coffee. That is my that is my answer. I drink copious amounts of coffee. As I said, I write in the morning from sort of 9 to 1 or 2. So I'll drink 6 cups of coffee. And I sleep well at night. Thank you. So I'll usually drink 6 cups of coffee. I'll start writing, and maybe a half an hour in, I'll kind of review what I did the day before. And then about a half an hour in, I'll go back to my main computer and have a bowl of cereal. And it's always a bowl of cereal with blueberries. And then back. And then otherwise it's just coffee. I don't snack otherwise at all. No.
Okay. So how do you celebrate when you finish a book?
I start the next one. That's what I always say, and I don't do it so much anymore. I used to teach creative writing classes, and I still give workshops and that. And I always say, what you do the day you finish a book, you start the next one. So, I write 4 books a year, so it's kind of, routine's not the right word, but finishing a book, it's a big thing for me. I mean, I'm really excited and really happy, but I don't celebrate in any way.
Okay.
Yeah.
You write them at the same time, the 4 series, or you really separate those?
No, totally separate. One book beginning to end. I won't even think about what I want the next one to be at the same time. Now, sometimes I have to stop. Like I'll get edits on, one book back from the editor once I've started the next one. So I will have to stop and address that. But I'll do those edits completely, get them back, and then start. And the reason I write one book beginning to end is because they're you might think they're similar because they're all cozies, but they're different in tone. The main characters in particular are very different. Different people, different approaches to life, and very different ways of solving crimes or not. So I need to keep them very separate in my mind.
Yes, I definitely notice a difference between your lighthouse and the Catskills protagonist there as well. So what does your family think about your writing? What do your daughters think?
I hope my daughters are proud of me. One of my daughters, my youngest daughter's name, by the way, is Alex. She helps sometimes with plotting a little bit. We'll sit and toss some plot ideas around. My other 2 daughters don't really do that. I'm not, some of my daughters read my books and some of my daughters don't. My mother reads all my books. My mother, who's actually visually impaired now, so she waits till they come on audiobook and she listens to them all. And I like to say my biggest fan in my family is my Aunt Joan, my mother's sister, who just loves my books. She looks forward to them so much. So it's nice.
Yes, so do I. I love your books as well. And I'm sure everybody in the audience here is excited for your next ones to come out.
I just have a couple of questions for you from the crowd, Vicki.
Okay.
The first question that I have for you is, do you have a number of books in mind when you start writing a cozy series, or is that number dictated by the publisher?
No, it's totally dictated by the publisher. Every cozy, because I have also written standalones before, as I mentioned. So every cozy series begins with the intention that it's going to be a series, which means that the mystery is solved completely within each book, but the relationships between the characters, aren't necessarily sort of resolved within each book. So no, I'm happy to keep writing each series as long as the publishers want to get them. So, and the Lighthouse Library one, the next one I think is number 10. So they're still going strong.
The second question that I have for you is, in a work for hire situation, does the publisher approach a few writers at a time with some premise and they pick the writer who fulfills that the best, or is there another way that that's done?
I'm sure it varies, a lot depending on. In my case, they approached. I'll give it a little bit of the background actually, because I think it's a good story. I'm quite good friends with Mary Jane Maffei, who's here this weekend talking to us, and I approached her with this idea I had for a cozy-ish series about a Canadian paramedic working in a Caribbean island. And I said to Mary Jane, would she show my idea to her agent? And Mary Jane said she'd be happy to do that. And she did. And the agent got back to me and she said she really liked it, but she didn't think she'd be able to find a home for it. So that, oh, well, okay, fine. That's the end of that. So when the agent was approached by Penguin Random House with this work for hire, she remembered me and she wrote to me and asked if I'd be interested. Now, before I go on, I'll say that I tell that story a lot because I really believe in the power of networking, and I really believe in the power of the Canadian mystery community. You know, that my entire cozy career is, I owe it to Mary Jane, who, just because she's a friend of mine, asked her for a favor, you know. Anyway, so I'm sure that different publishers approached it a different way. What happened in this case is Penguin Random House said to my agent, who's now my agent, she still is, that they would like 2 proposals. So she went to me and she went to someone else. I don't know who it is. And the standard proposal is like 3 chapters. They wanted to read, 3 chapters, and they liked my 3 chapters and asked me to offer me the contract. So that's what happened in my case. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's all the questions that we had.
Thanks, Peyton. Yes, I have some more just before we wrap up here, because we haven't really touched too much on Sherlock Holmes.
Oh.
So how did the Sherlock Holmes series start for you? Is it a love for Sherlock Holmes, perhaps?
That was, I was thinking, I was wanting to look for a new series to write, and I thought bookshop would be fun. Alluding back to the beginning when I said in cozy mysteries, the character quite often owns some kind of a small business that people think would be a fun thing to own. So I bookshop this. I kind of wanted my bookshop to have a little bit of a twist. So I thought, well, how about a Sherlock Holmes dedicated bookshop? And I actually didn't intend the protagonist to be the Sherlock Holmes character, but almost immediately once I started writing the first page, she became the Sherlock Holmes character as I see it. So I call it, sort of my interpretation of Sherlock Holmes as a modern young woman today. So it's one of those things that all sort of grew out of the germ of an idea. And I think I like writing those books the best because I really enjoy sort of thinking, what would Sherlock Holmes do here? And she goes out for ice cream. What kind of ice cream would Sherlock Holmes want? Well, I got her a French vanilla. That kind of stuff. And playing with the sort of mind of Sherlock Holmes is lots of fun. I really do. I really do get a kick out of writing those series. I think I can. They're kind of a little bit of a cozy with a little bit of an edge, because the character, like Sherlock Holmes, she's not always pleasant to people who aren't following her train of thought fast enough, right? So she can be a little bit abrupt, a little bit rude, although she doesn't mean to be. So I think it's got a tiny little bit of an edge. Yeah.
Does it draw in Sherlock Holmes fans, do you find?
It does actually. I was I think it was in September, I was one of the guest speakers at the 221B Jubilee celebrations in Toronto at the Sherlock Holmes. There's a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle room at the Toronto Reference Library, and it was their 50th anniversary. So they had a Doyle weekend, and I was one of the guest speakers there. It does, and you don't have to. Nothing in my books is based on the Sherlock Holmes books. There's no clues, and you have to have read The Hound of the Baskervilles or something. There's nothing like that. I don't tie in at all to the source material, but I do drop in a few little, what they call Easter eggs. Like, for example, there are 17 steps in the shop between the shop floor and the offices. Well, there are 17 steps at 221B Baker Street. The cat's name is Moriarty. The cat hates our character Gemma Doyle because she's the Sherlock Holmes character. The cat seems to get on with everybody, but he hates her, right? And I sort of see him as a master criminal trapped in a 10-pound body.
That's great.
And that's the sort of thing I said that I have fun with it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be fun. That would be fun. I wish I had the creativity to
Thank you.
Endurance to write like you do.
Can I mention one thing before we carry on? That as Christmas is coming up, a lot of people have asked me if the year-round Christmas series is coming back, and the answer I'm very happy to say is it is. It's moving publishers. There were 5 books in the year-round Christmas series published by Penguin Random House. They ended it at the end of 5, which is actually fairly normal for a mid-range cozy series, 5 books. And Crooked Lane picked it up. So after there hasn't been one for a couple of years, and in 2023, there's going to be a new year-round Christmas book for everybody to look forward to.
Perfect. And where will they be able to get these books?
Absolutely everywhere. Fine books are sold online. I live in Picton, Ontario. So if you're ever visiting Prince Edward County, Books and Company stocks a wide selection of my books, as do the independent bookstores in Ottawa and the online books as well, or the online
Perfect.
book.
Perfect. So we'll just plug some of those Ottawa
Please do.
bookstores. We've got Perfect Books, Books on Beechwood, and there's a new one, Spaniel's Tale in Westboro.
Oh, I've got
And
a bookstore. I'll go there. I'm in Ottawa right now. I must drop in.
oh, fabulous. So I guess that's our time for today, but I want to thank Vicki so much. This was such an honor of mine to interview you. Once again, I'm a fan, so I should have brought some of Vicki's books.
So should I.
I'm excited for the next ones to come as well. I want to thank everybody who came and spent their time with us today for this interview. We've got